All right, so if this ceasefire does not work and war continues, then we can expect in round 2, the fighting will get much worse. Okay, so the Americans will start to target civilian infrastructure, including bridges, universities, reservoirs, power plants, desalination plants. Basically, it will destroy Iran's capacity to be a nation state. In response, the Iranians can destroy a lot more energy infrastructure, okay? So what it's done now, it's basically close off the Strait of Hormuz, but it can also close off the Red Sea, okay? And they can also target pipelines of natural gas. Basically, it can take offline 1/3 of the world's energy supply, and this would, of course, cause an economic depression, okay? Unfortunately, the national security strategy of the United States doesn't really care. If you just read the national security strategy, they already have factored this in and they don't really care. So the idea is to prioritize strategic interests. And what this basically means is that America has the world's greatest navy. No one else comes close. And so all that they do is contain the world's choke points. And the world must bend to the will of America. Okay, does that make sense? If you want to trade, then you must depend on American generosity. Okay? So already what's happening is that this area, it's being closed off. But America has made moves to close off other areas as well. So America is exerting more control over the Panama Canal, okay? Basically, the Western Hemisphere is under something called the Donroe Doctrine. The Donroe Doctrine basically states that America can do whatever it wants in the Western Hemisphere. If you want to come here and trade, you have to go through us. China depends on a lot of resources from the Western Hemisphere, especially from South America. All right? Over here is something called the Lithium Triangle. This is Venezuela. Brazil provides China with a lot of agricultural products, soybeans basically. And what Trump is saying is that, hey, in the future, you want to trade over here, China, you have to go through us, okay? So he's basically embargoing the Western Hemisphere from China. Over here is something called the Strait of Malacca. This is the most important choke point in the world, especially for East Asia, because as you can see, the Middle East, if it is to access South Korea, China, and Japan, it has to go through the Strait of Malacca. But guess what, guys? Everything goes through the Strait of Malacca. And this is important because the United States has signed a deal with Indonesia. So what we can expect is that America and Indonesia, their militaries will start to cooperate more and more. This is and the reason why is America is moving towards creating the first island chain. Basically, militarizing the first island chain in order to deter China, to embargo China, basically. What we're also seeing is that Japan is now rapidly remilitarizing. They're signing more agreements with Australia and other nations, okay? They're building more weapons. This is all being encouraged by the United States as a deterrent to China. Again, this is really important. America does not want to destroy China. It does not want to humiliate China. It wants to control China. Because the Chinese economy is still very strong and powerful, and America wants to make sure that the Chinese are buying more US dollars. Okay? So it is entirely possible what's going to happen is that the Chinese will have no choice but to buy from America, okay? Especially energy. The entire Western Hemisphere belongs to America, and you want to trade with the Western Hemisphere, then you need to sign a trade deal with America. Okay? What America is also doing that's really important is that it's planning to take over Greenland. Okay? By taking over Greenland, you're blocking access. China and Russia cannot access the Western Hemisphere, okay, through the Arctic. You're also seizing control over the Arctic, okay? And there are lots of minerals and oil in the Arctic as well. Okay? The Strait of Gibraltar is also another strategic choke point, and America has signed a deal with Morocco to enhance more cooperation. Okay? So I can see what America is doing is, when they mean strategic interest, prioritizing strategic interest, what they mean is exerting control over the world's choke points so that they can control global trade. Okay? They're not going to control the entire ocean because it's much too big, but if they control certain choke points, like the Middle East, and the Strait of Malacca, that's probably enough. Okay? The point is to get China to submit. The point is to control China, not to destroy China. All right, this is important because if you want to become a major power in the world, you need to trade effectively. So Russia has something called the North-South corridor. As you can see, it runs through Iran, okay? Iran is very important for the Russian North-South corridor. And that's why the United States is attacking Iran. Okay? And that's why the United States is not going to ever stop attacking Iran. Because as long as Iran is at peace, Russia can trade with the world. But if Iran is being destroyed, there's too much war, this entire region is blocked off from both Russia and China. Okay? Russia has something called the Belt and Road Initiative. As you can see, okay, from a map, the center of the Belt and Road Initiative is, of course, Iran. All right? If China wants to access Africa, Europe, the Middle East, it has to go through Iran. Or it goes through the sea, the Strait of Malacca. But as I already said, the next step for America is to close off the Strait of Malacca as well to Chinese trade. Then where do you go? Well, then you go over to the Western Hemisphere, but that's American territory. Okay? Yes, you can trade with Russia. You can trade with Russia. You can do that. But it's not enough for your economy. Does that make sense? Right now, China gets about 20% of its oil from Russia. Maybe Russia can provide 30% or 40% at most. That's very optimistic. But where are you going to get the other 50%, 60%, okay? Your options are very limited. If Iran is at war, can't give you any oil, then you're forced to buy from the United States. Okay? If you're forced to buy from the United States can set the price. It can set terms. It can dictate terms to you. And what the United States will say, you have to buy in US dollars. Okay? And that saves their economy. Right? Does it make sense, guys? This is not a hard idea to understand. This is exactly what it says in the US National Security Strategy. Okay? So, in many ways, you can make the argument that what's happening around the world right now, it's all an American policy of containing China, where in these flags are US military bases. As you can see, China is completely surrounded by US military bases in Japan, in South Korea, in Taiwan, even in Indonesia and Malaysia. Philippines, China's completely surrounded, okay? And this is it, the Strait of Malacca. This is a major choke point. And as you can see, it's not that hard for America to cut off that choke point, right? You see how much trade goes through the Strait of Malacca? You can see how many US bases are here. And you can see a lot of this trade goes to the Middle East, but hey, guess what? The Middle East is at war right now, so no more oil, no more energy, no more LNG from the Middle East. So you might go to Angola, but this is very important. The Americans have recently announced a naval blockade in the Indian Ocean, okay? So that's cut off your route as well. So if you're China, yes, you could rely on Russia, but you see how little this is, okay? There's too little trade between Russia and China, and you could build it up, but it's going to take you 10, 20 years' time. And what do you do for the next 10 years, right? Your people need food to eat. You need energy to fuel your factories. And so for the next 10 years, you have no choice but to work with the United States. And that's what Trump means by negotiating from a position of strength. Because you can set terms. You can force China to accept whatever terms you want. And quite honestly, if you just look at this map, there's very little that China can do about it, okay? There's this war in the Middle East. There's also this war in Russia, which also absorbs a lot of Russian energy. So Russia doesn't have that much resources to spare to China anyway. But America does, the Western Hemisphere does, okay? Because the Western Hemisphere is at peace. So as long as the Western Hemisphere maintains a fortress, okay? Meaning no one can attack the Western Hemisphere, then the Western Hemisphere can continue to supply resources to the world at war. So this is what the war is about, guys, okay? It's about creating conflict in the world so the United States can maintain its empire. And the way it maintains its empire is by maintaining its control over global trade, okay? And the idea is America in the future will provide the world with energy, resources, weapons, and financing. Meaning we will actually lend you the money to buy this stuff as well. And what do we call this stuff? US dollars, okay? And so this worked really well in the 1950s under something called the Marshall Plan. Okay? The Marshall Plan. Same idea where America made products and it lent money to Europe to buy products from America. Same concept here where in the future, the world is at war, people are poor, but it's okay because America will lend you money to buy energy, resources, and weapons from America. Okay? And American factories will go up. America will be great again. Make America great again. All right? Okay. But for this plan to fully work out, America needs three things, okay? The first thing that it needs to do is create a national draft. Does that make sense, guys? Because you need soldiers in order to maintain America's core interests, right? So whichever nation is defying you, you go attack, right? The goal is for Russia and Europe to constantly fight each other. The goal is for China and Japan to constantly fight each other. You need Iran to constantly fight with the GCC and Israel, okay? So you have these three major conflicts around the world. But if there's any nation that's at peace, well, then you have to create conflicts, okay? Maybe in Africa. You also want to control the Western Hemisphere, so you need soldiers to go and conquer nations that defy you. Okay, so the first thing that you need is a national draft. All right. Second thing that you need is something called continuity of agenda. What does this mean? It means like now that you have this plan in motion, you cannot have a change in government, okay? So let's just say they're implementing this plan, and they're doing that right now. In 2028, the Democrats win. Well, that would screw things up, okay? So Trump needs a third term, right? A Trump third term. Because only he can implement this plan and make America great again. Okay? And the third thing that you need is an AI surveillance state. Basically, AI police state. Why? Because again, this plan can only work if the Americans don't rise up and revolt like they did in the Vietnam War. Okay? If you have a national draft in place, if Trump's going for a third term, there's going to be a lot of Americans who are going to protest in the streets, who are going to rebel, right? You can't have that happen. They'll screw things up. Therefore, you need an AI surveillance state in order to help them see the light, right? So, ICE, guys, okay? ICE. People believe that ICE is being sent to the streets of America in order to catch illegal immigrants. The problem with this is that you don't need ICE. You just need cooperation from the state authorities, okay? What ICE is really doing is basically creating conditions for a police state. It's normalizing or making common the idea of armed soldiers patrolling the streets of America in all the major cities. All right? And the reason why we think this, or we can suspect this, is look at their budget, man. Look at this budget. Before, the budget was kind of stable, then boom, it goes up to $90 billion. That's a lot of money, okay? That's almost like a new national police force that is only obedient to Donald Trump. It's basically Donald Trump's private police force in order to implement his vision, okay? Also, data centers, guys. Data centers. Now, I know that some of you are big fans of artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence doesn't really make any money, right? ChatGPT, you can't make money off that. You can't make money off digital girlfriends or digital pets, right? So why is America building all these data centers around the world? In fact, the federal government under Trump has a plan called Operation Stargate, where they will build $500 billion, okay? They will invest $500 billion in building data centers around the United States. Well, you would want to build data centers if you want to create a AI surveillance state, right? Where everyone has digital ID, digital currency, and where everyone can be monitored to avoid people from rebelling against Trump. Okay? And that is the idea, okay? And you listen to this and you think, oh my God, America is doomed. Or Donald Trump's going to become king for the rest of his life. There's nothing we can do. Well, the problem is this. The problem is that this idea of imperial conquest is actually not a new idea, guys, okay? It really isn't. Empires have been doing this for a long, long time. It has not worked out well, okay? So the goal, again, to summarize, is to create a situation where you have Greater North America, or what they call the Technate. Okay? And this becomes a fortress. You have infinite resources, infinite manpower, and you can sell weapons, resources, and financing to the rest of the world. And you want to create as much conflict in the world as possible, right? So here it'll be between China and Japan. Here it'll be between Iran, Israel, and the GCC, okay? Here it'll be between Europe and Russia. Basically, you want a world forever at war so that you can control the world. And all America has to do is control key choke points, okay? Key strategic choke points, like the Strait of Malacca, Hormuz, Gibraltar, Panama. Why? Because once you control the choke point, you can control which nations get what resources. If a nation is becoming too strong, you give them less resources. If a nation is too weak, you give them more resources. And as a result, you can always maintain the balance of power in each region, right? So it sounds like a great plan, but it's not going to work out. Why? Well, because of something called nationalism. Okay? Because when you do this, when you are an empire and you impose your will on other nations, these nations are not happy about it. Right? So imagine Japan, South Korea, Europe. There people know that they're being used, right? So eventually they'll be like, screw this. We want to be independent. We want peace. So they will eventually rise up against the empire. And the way they will do this is they will work together to destroy America, or basically to remove America from the world. You can't actually attack America. Now, what America can do is say, screw you, we're the entire Western Hemisphere, we have infinite resources, we can make infinite weapons, and you can never attack us, so we'll come and attack you. Okay? They could do that. The problem then is you have division and corruption. Okay? So an empire in decline always suffers from corruption and division. Corruption just means that, yes, you've allocated $1.5 trillion to making weapons. But guess what? The vast majority of that will be stolen by people. Right? America right now is in a lot of trouble because it's a very corrupt place. Division means that the Democrats and Republicans fight all the time, what we call political polarization. So it is possible that as America is being asked to fight more wars overseas, you have civil war in America. The other thing is, when America takes over the entire North America, including Canada, Greenland, Mexico, Cuba, Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Honduras, they won't be happy about it, okay? So you're going to have insurgencies. All right? And this three problems, nationalism, corruption, and division, means that when America actually tries to implement this plan, it's going to backfire. It's going to accelerate the collapse of the American empire. All right? And then you ask yourself, okay, if historically we know that empires will collapse, why do they do this? And the answer is because it benefits them in the short term. Okay? This is a short-term solution that creates long-term problems, but who cares about the long term? Let's just enjoy the short term, okay? All right? Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions?
But for the war between Iran and America, you previously said that America will lose the war, but according to the analysis that you just did, like America will try to control nations around China and those nations, but it will finally backfire. So the result of that predictions will still be America will lose, right?
Yeah, so again, the major prediction is that America may in the short term seem as though it is winning, but in the long term, because of corruption, division, and nationalism, America will be forced to retreat back to the Western Hemisphere, and it will lose its empire. All right? And yes, America will lose the war in Iran. Okay, be forced to retreat from Iran, but it doesn't really have to win the war. It doesn't have to defeat Iran. It just has to make Iran constantly in a state of chaos and war. Okay, does that make sense? Because the point is to control the choke points. Okay, the key are the choke points. These are the keys. This is what America must protect. And what happens in Europe, Russia, China, Japan, Iran doesn't really matter. But what America wants to do is create as much chaos as possible in these places so that they depend on America for resources, for financing, for weapons. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, America doesn't really care anymore if it loses its war in Iran. That's not the point. The point is to maintain control over these strategic choke points, so the world depends on American resources to survive. Okay? Yeah?
Does China or any other countries discerns that America is trying to control the trade route of China?
Oh, look. Okay. What America is doing is obvious. All right? It's silly. It's really obvious to people, right? There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it because America has a blue water navy that controls the oceans. So the question then is, what happens in the long term? Well, in the long term, what's going to happen is that Russia will challenge America in these choke points, okay? And this is already happening in Cuba, okay? Cuba is here. And we'll discuss this next class, but Cuba is under embargo right now, and Cuba is trying to become closer with Russia, okay? So what Russia is going to do is set up basically its own navy to challenge the American Navy. And Russia cannot win against the American Navy, but what it can do is fight a war of attrition against the American Navy, raising costs, okay? That's number one. Number two is that if America can go and blow up energy supplies around the world to make the world more dependent on America. Well, Russia can also blow up energy supplies to make the world dependent on Russia. Okay? So what's going to happen is that Russia and America are going to compete against each other. All right? And most of the world is ultimately going to side with Russia in order to balance the United States, because the United States is too much of a bully. And at this point, in the short term, China has no choice but to work with both Russia and America, because China's not strong enough to challenge either. Does it make sense? Okay. Yeah, Alan?
So my question is about how Trump gonna like deal with the internal conflict in American. Like there's right now he only had like 37% of supporting rate, and Democrats seems didn't agree with his plan. So how he gonna do about this? And what is if Democrat Party didn't agree with Trump's plan? What is the plan of Democrat to American?
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, the Democrats have no plan. Okay. This is why America is in so much trouble, because the Democrats have absolutely no plan of themselves. Okay. So even if the Democrats were to win office in 2028, what they will probably do is continue Trump's plan, because they themselves don't have any plan. Trump's plan to stay in power is just basically he'll cheat. Okay. He'll rig the elections. He'll cheat. Okay? That's his plan moving forward. And he'll probably get away with it. Okay? Okay. Any more questions, guys? All right, so we'll continue this next class, okay?